wait for a minute here as people
Yeah.
are joining.
Okay.
We'll just hang out and adjust.
That's the word of 2020, recalculate.
We're just waiting. I see a lot of people are joining us right now, and we're just waiting for a beat as everyone continues to join us, and we all adjust our environments. And I think we have about 12 people, 9 or 10 people on now. So I'll just go ahead and begin chatting, so we can, I think more people will continue to join us. And so, hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Laura Kosolopoff-Wright, and I'm the communications manager at the Wiregrass Museum of Art in Dothan, Alabama. And we're so glad you all have joined us this evening for this wonderful virtual edition of our Visiting Artists series, a conversation with Sara Armstrong and Barb Bondy. And although this year has not been ideal for any of us, just this opportunity to use this technology that we have to invite so many more of you all to our programs who would not normally be able to attend in person. So I think that's a really wonderful thing. We've really enjoyed getting to know people through these virtual and digital channels, and we've certainly appreciated the opportunity for many people around the state and the Southeast and the country to get to know the work of the Wiregrass Museum of Art. And one of the our favorite things that we get to do here at the museum is spotlight the work of Alabama artists. And we have two wonderful Alabama artists with us here this evening, Sara Armstrong and Barb Bondy, who are joining us from Birmingham and Opelika, respectively. And they're going to introduce themselves in just a minute. But I wanted to say that if you are able to get to Dothan between now and the end of the year, Sara has her exhibition, Threads and Layers, which she does not like to talk about as a retrospective. It's a survey of her work, and looking forward, looking back and forward simultaneously. So please, if you have a chance, come and see Threads and Layers, which is on view at WMA through the end of the year. And before I disappear from your video view, I would like to tell everyone that at the end of the talk, at the end of the conversation with Sara and Barb, they will take some questions. So if you have a question for them, please add it to the chat box or Q&A box, either one, down at the bottom. And we'll get to it at the end of the conversation, and we'll read the questions aloud, so everyone will be able to know the question that's being asked, because I'm not sure what everyone can see. And so with that, I think I will say goodbye video-wise and mute myself here, and hopefully everything will go well. I'm sharing images for them, so hopefully this will all go well, and I'm going to stop my video, and Sara and Barb, take it away.
So thank you, Laura. It's really fun for us both to be here. What I have right now is over 4 decades of work where the work is really reacting to other different work. And so it's early work is very much talking to current work. Paul Barrett, the curator, I think is with us right now too. And but it was important for me that it isn't a retrospective, that it is more, it's more looking at what the work is about and how it relates. I'm multimedia, I go in many directions, and very much involved in science, body, organic, and all of this sort of threads run through it, organic change. And so Barb and I are enjoying to have a conversation tonight with you all and sort of talk about some of the things that we share and how we're different. Barb, you want to just say a little bit about your work?
Yeah, in a few sentences. So I would say, well, for the last 2 decades, actually, I've been a visual artist, and I've also been teaching drawing mainly. And I've been teaching at Auburn University, and as well in the Alabama Prison Art and Education Project. Now, my work actually has also, for the last 2 decades, centered around metacognition. So that's thinking about thinking. And I draw connections between science, continuing interest in the brain and neuroscience, long interest in that and how that links to drawing. And then I also connect even mathematics, art, the critical discourses of drawing, and the humanities. So I use tracking, tracing, measuring, all through drawing to probe a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. So I had the opportunity to meet Sara last year in March, just before the pandemic was declared. The honor, I would say, I was invited to Ground Floor Contemporary for a show. She's the founder of that space. And we really got to know each other through continuing conversations. And we saw common interests and differences in our work. And art and science, of course, is a common interest to both of us. And so, Sara, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about some of those things, how art and science threads through your work, and where you see our overlaps or how you think about it.
So we're looking at a piece of mine. It's an atrium sculpture that was installed in 2014, and it's actually at UAB in the neurology building. But it's about MS and multiple sclerosis, and the commission was to be about that. I did not know. I am very interested in science. I didn't really. That's an area of a study I haven't done. So my approach was to basically turn my studio into sort of a study lab, so that because I had to understand what multiple sclerosis was about before I could think about doing a piece of sculpture that, and this, as I said, was a commission, and it had to be, that's what it had to be about that. So this is the installed finished piece. And as I sort of, in a couple more slides, I will just talk a little bit further. It was an extremely hard piece for me because I had to understand what was happening and what I was going to do. How was I going to talk about it, and how that could be of value. So, Barb, you want to talk a little bit now about some of your art in relation to science?
Yeah, thanks. I like how you reference the lab, that the studio is a bit like a laboratory. And I do have projects that I seek to understand something deeper. And I think with the image we're about to see, the drawing is called Deep Seeing. And this is a long line of thinking about thinking, and I arrived at a point where I was trying to sort of lure the viewer in, because I'd read a study whereby the author Irving Biederman, he was talking about the visual pathway in the brain. And what the study was saying is that if you have these novel experiences and your interest is held, and it's often through things that are aesthetically pleasing, that if you're engaged for a longer period of time, the image goes deeper down the visual pathway and eventually embeds in the memory. And so I love this idea of sort of entangling myself. I think while I'm making the drawing, and so I feel like I'm in the drawing. And if the viewer will look at it long enough and embed it in memory, we all get embedded in that image in the viewer's memory. So also, I think what I was going to talk about maybe was this research project. There's another image that you're going to see here of a brain. So I've been also working in an interdisciplinary way with a collaborative project where we applied for funding, and the project was funded after a pilot study. I was working with Dr. Jeff Katz, a cognitive neuroscientist. And the question I had was, does learning to draw change the brain? Because a lot of artists who do draw will say, yes, of course it does, but I wanted to get some evidence. So this took a number of years. But what we did was we scanned the brains of art students before they learned to draw and then at the end of the semester after they had learned to draw. And then we also scanned the brains in the same time points with students at Auburn who had no drawing experience and no drawing classes, so that we could say what we found was due to the drawing students. And what we found, to just zip to the end, we had students go into the functional MRI machine lying down, and they looked at images, and there were tasks they had to do. And the tasks were based on drawing concepts. So their brains were being scanned as they solved and resolved the tasks. So what we found was not in the non-art students, but in the art students, yes, indeed, they showed changes in their brains, and this is globally, and you can see all the different colors representing each of the tasks. So just real quickly to wrap up here, we found parts of the brain. These are the areas that are really exciting that got activated: attention, decision-making, motor control, top-down control, which applies learned behavior to how you make a decision, visual information processing, and working memory. And what's really exciting about this is it adds to the argument about art education, that learning to draw is not just a perceptual skill, it's cognitive skills too. They're actually one and the same, but it's a much broader scope. So I'm excited that I got to talk about that project in addition to my artwork. And thank you for asking.
So Barb, maybe now we should sort of go to materials and think about that, about how we are approaching materials and ways of working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thanks. I think that's interesting, and I think viewers will find that interesting. So the next image you're going to see is called timeline. And so with my work, it is project-based. I go from project to project or question to question. And this one in particular, I was trying to, and I think I'm always trying to make what is not visible visible. So here I'm trying to show the infinite process of thought in one glance. And so I use almost 2,000 pencil refills. And what I'm thinking about in this case is, again, the form. The idea has driven the form. So it had to take the sculptural form to show, like I'm using it as a metaphor, for example, how the non-visible interwoven structure of thought is here. So if you think about every time you use a pencil and it scrapes across the paper, all that material gets deposited. And you could be calculating, you could be writing, you could be drawing. So there's a lot of thought packed into one pencil refill. So that's where I was going with this. And a lot of my work is just drawings on paper, but this one had to take the form of the sculpture. How about you, Sara?
So, yeah, so I think with talking about sort of materials and process, if we could have the next image, or it's actually a short little video, because this is the sort of presentation of a video that I did when I was able to get the commission. So
this is the model for the sculpture concerning MS to be located at UAB. The model is 1 inch to the foot. As you see, the spinal cord is coming in from the 3rd floor. You see the neurons are located right as it comes in. You see the glacial cells wrapping around. You see that as I'm moving you around. You will also see that as we go around, you see the light that is against the windows. That will be shining out. You see it over here.
So, Laura, so with, okay, when I presented this, and I did not know the materials I was using. I did not know the light I was using. I did not know how it was on earth it was going to be built, but I had a sort of beginning concept of what the piece was going to be and how it was going to relate to MS. My way of working is, and Bob and I talk about that we both have this whole questioning. Mine is, and I guess we both have this whole being lost in our questions. And Laura, let's turn to the next model, which is a lot later. And so this is closer to what you saw in the finished piece. And you actually, at this point in time, I know that I'm using LEDs, and that is going, light emitting diodes that are going to represent the neurons. And when they stop, that would reference MS. I probably at this point have figured out what the little glue lines would be, but, and then the question gets asked, how much is this going to cost way back there? How was I to know? Because I had no earthly idea how I was going to build it. But that sort of being lost and trying to figure out how and what you're going to do is a sort of interesting gift as an artist. The struggles to do that and how you can slowly push the work on till it does something that it needs to do. This piece also had to be, you can see I changed sides of the entrance. A lot of changes were done between that first one, but it had the beginning of that concept was with it. And so,
Yeah.
Barb, shall we?
Yeah, I think, well, I just want to say before we go on, I think that's really courageous the way you work. I'm like 80%, I do the thinking and then I make it, and I'm far more cautious. So I wouldn't be comfortable like you are in that working through the process as you go. Somehow I feel like I have to have it all lined up and then boom, I make it. So I'm really impressed with how you work.
But Barb, you are able to get clearer in your thinking. I have to keep going in order to get clearer in my thinking.
But that's how we're unique, right?
Yes, that's how we're unique.
There's something I've never really had a chance to talk with you about, but how did you get started in art?
So I didn't start, I went to elementary, I taught elementary education. And at some point I thought, well, maybe I will go back in science and do a master's in science. I just sort of, and then about that time I had some health problems and really had to back away a lot. And with that, my mother and I she was a painter, and we started going to the Birmingham Museum of Art. And from that moment on, it was all very straight line. Undergraduate, you go back in undergraduate in art, graduate school in art, teach a little bit, and move to New York. So but it was interesting, and I think it was great being a little older coming back, because it made you more independent, I think. So what about you?
Well, as a kid, I always said I was going to be an artist. I'm going to be an artist. But when it finally came down to it, I was, I think it was 17 when I finished high school, and I was cautious. So I chose to study photography because I figured I could make a living. It wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but I did it. And while I was studying photography, they said, and these are not my words, I remember a critique. And one of them said, this is too deep for applied photography. So I was really wanted to dig into the concepts. So it was later on that I started to do my BFA. And once I started that, I really lit up. It's like, oh my gosh, these are my people. These are the questions I want to ask. And then as I got into graduate school, I too was later in life. I call myself a late bloomer, and I don't mind it at all. And that's where I really got a grip on my ideas, who I was as an artist, what I wanted to contribute to the world. So yeah, that's how I got there, or got here, I guess.
So does anyone else have the screen? Are we on the screen, or is it frozen just on my end?
It's a little bit warped as the image.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, goodness.
Laura, could we come back on?
Yes. Or is it, hold on.
Yeah, it's
I
just,
think-
we're stuck in the PowerPoint.
It's called
Yes.
sentient. I think it's taking on kind of.
So,
I'm resuming my share. It should be resuming. Sorry, guys.
okay.
It's just, it seems to be stuck. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Hold on.
That's
All right. Can you guys see?
no, we
Yeah.
just see the model, the last image of the model of sentient
Okay.
matrix. No,
Are we
you
there
gotta
now?
go back. No, you're still in PowerPoint. Oh, Dana says I see both artist and image. Okay. And so let's wait on the PowerPoint. Let's go back, Laura. We're just sort of stuck. Dana says she sees it.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, everyone.
No, I think it's Barb and I. So yeah, just go back on. Oh, there we are. Good. So I think, the other thing is, what would we want to say to ourselves? Advice, because now, since we've sort of lived a little bit more in the arts and the world, Barb, you want to start with what advice you think you would give?
Well, how about if I say this? So somebody once said something to me that haunted me for years, and they said, Barb, you're a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I was really offended by that. And I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I'm not an expert at anything. But what I realized much later, so I would tell my earlier self, I'm a meanderer, right? So I love to, very curious. If someone says, have you done this? No, but I could try, right? Or I'll do this. I tried all kinds of different approaches, writing and different ways of making art. And I followed my gut. I followed my interests, but always in the back of my mind was that, oh, should I? So let me just say this. There's, again, much later in my career, I discovered a term. It's called bricoleur or bricolage. And what that is a bricoleur is someone who creates from a diverse range of available things. And I am a bricoleur. So I am neither a jack of all trades nor a master of none. I'm a meanderer who has become good at bricolage. So my advice would be accept yourself as you are. Don't try to be what you're not, because that's the way you think, right? So follow your instincts. That's what I would tell myself, and be okay with it. Don't let other people tell you what you should be. How about you? What about you?
Bob, that's great. And, it comes along sort of one of the same things in this, that, living in New York and for so long, and, when we used to have a slide sheet and you could hold the slide sheet up and you needed in just a few seconds for people to be able to say who you are. And I could never hold up one with images and say who I was. I just never fit. And so it always worried me about, oh, look at all these directions you go. Again, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah.
And this, one of the things that has been great with the shows and this book that I've just, with Threads and Layers, the book, it has been a time for me that I could really look back and look forward and back. And so let's put up the image of the Dan Talley's essay, and I'll start with just making a few comments about that. Just go back. So in the book there are essays, and this one was particularly really important. Dan is an old friend. He's a writer, an artist, and he traced the work that I did from in Birmingham, my early work, all the way through the air players, which so that it would be basically from the late 70s through the sort of mid 90s. And it's something that I had, when I left Birmingham, I sort of left the work here, but you never leave who you are. And so it was just a really amazing experience to have someone that would dig into this. Sounds and tapes were digitized, so that, and just the conversations that I got to have with Dan and the questions he asked me, that was just something. And let's turn to the next page, and the next page. And so this was some very early sound drawings of sculpture, and this sculpture is in the show at the Wiregrass, not the ones on the bottom, and the sort of wood figures, that those are 7 feet tall, but so they're not so little, but those were shown without the canvas on them. So that's what the interiors of those pieces look like. But I was trying to understand with these drawings and a lot of this work, how the sound was to be structured for the piece, and to end up being able to have this experience and this, and actually Dan's essay, which is sort of a major piece for me, for him to really dig into these relationships in this work is a real gift. And so I would say to myself, again, just as Barb said, trust yourself, go with what you're going with. It's your work. It's who you are, and it relates. You don't need someone else. If someone can't get it, it's just fine. It's not their work and they can't get it. And if you can't explain it, I think part of my issues was a lot of time that, I wanted to be able to verbalize better. But that's not as critical as the work is. And as you move on, and I also know I have tunnel vision. And so I a lot of times can't focus, I can only talk about what I'm focused very tight on. And so that's just who I am. And so it doesn't, so my advice to myself was, do the work, keep on, and have faith in the work. So,
well, I find your body of work is stunning. And I mean, that's the thing. When I got to know you, I was just so, amazed at the depth and body of work and the different formats you've used to express your ideas. So, really, the question to ask is, what on earth is next? And I must say, by the way, I have the book and I cannot wait to go through it page by page. I'm very excited. And it's such a model for an artist's lifespan of work. It's a marathon. But what's next?
So, yeah, now we can just go back to us if we can. But yeah, what's next? So I'll start that and then you go with it. Okay. Again, I'm still in the midst of making the drawings for the limited edition, getting the books out. And I found that I don't really have to worry about what's next. What's next always comes. It is what the interesting thing is that we are so trained to say, oh, here's what I'm doing, and this is so important. And instead of thinking, well, it's time, I'm taking time, I have faith that I'm going to do something else that's going to maybe be pretty good, something else that's going to not be so good, but it's all, I'm going to be going forward. What about you, Barb?
Well, and I know that's what a question to ask after this massive project of creating the book. But I think it's more about what we say for ourselves, what's next, because I think it's just that constant pursuit of questions and curiosity. I read, and sometimes I get ideas, or I link ideas in ways like I'll pick up a book I've had for years and it was suddenly the time to start reading it, not when I bought it. So to me, it's like I follow the sparks, and there's no shortage of sparks. It's like sparklers. And what's next is like everything. I'm excited to pursue this idea and that idea. And there's always an idea cooking, several ideas cooking, and, also interests I didn't expect. And so one thing that's kind of important here is for the what's next is somebody once said to me in graduate school, and I've said it to students, you can have more than one body of work. So you can be working on several bodies of work. So that's where, yeah, what's next is, I don't know, and everything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I do think that sort of the thing about that you can work on different bodies of work. And a lot of times you can't work on something very large and something very small at the same moment in time, your scale or your relationships of space. And so you do shift around, and that it really does help you to just to know that you can, and you don't have to do it all at once either.
And I think too, we're always wanting to challenge ourselves. So even if we do have, a group of ideas to pursue, there is that as well. It's like, what can I do that I haven't done before? And how can I do it differently? Sort of getting out of our pattern thinking.
And getting out of that safety zone.
Yes, being uncomfortable is important.
And the other thing is knowing that change is going to happen. We're so in the midst of it. That really kind of brings us to our next sort of, what sort of advice, like what's next, and what sort of advice would we want to give to any artist or anyone?
Yeah, I think, you've touched on a lot too. And it's like, don't worry about being liked. Be sincere. I always tell students to tighten the gap between being and making. So if the closer the work gets to who you are, the more sincere it is. So try not to even think that you're making art per se, but think about the ideas that you want to pursue, the contributions you want to make to the world, because you're putting something into the world that's never been there before. So it should be important to you to do it. And also, two other things I'd say, which I said to you, is, making art is not a sprint, it's a marathon, right? It's a long career. And also, something I heard somebody once say, not that I'm into sports metaphors, but this was a good one, that not everything you do can be a home run. Right?
Yeah.
Watch a baseball game, you can't hit a home run after a home run. So whatever that means to you, you can't always have a home run. So keep working. How about you?
Yeah. I think the thing that, and we talked about this too, is about how that it's so important for us to talk to other artists, talk to people, get out of what our work is about, try to dig into what their work is about, try to grab hold of it, understand it, so that our communication and the stimulation can be, because I think sometimes we're so concerned with, like, oh, we're doing this and it's so important, or so into of what we're doing. But I think it's really important that we step out of that and that we exchange with others with what they're doing, and be able to have those conversations, and have a lot of those conversations. We're so, what is a gift now is we're not confined with just where we live, but we need to not be limited with where we live. We need to be reaching out, the country, the world. And I think it's wonderful when I hear about artists, or just people having the conversations with other and beginning to know someone else.
And I think we really enjoy that with each other. I always feel great. Like I want to just get to work because I'm interested in what you're doing. Right. We have to stay curious about what other artists are doing. It's not just about us. And it's a way
Mhm.
of becoming informed, you know, and moving away from the past is important too.
Uh-huh.
Finding your way of talking about the things you need to talk about. I agree.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, is being interested in others' creative processes and what drives them.
Yeah. And reading
Yes.
about other artists, you know, just any way that you can be connecting.
Yes.
And, you know, I think Instagram has been a great one for people being able to reach out and see and do.
I agree. It pushes us all forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give and take, right? Give and take.
Mhm.
Take.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not all one-sided.
Should we check and see if there are any questions?
Good idea. Oh, looks like there might be.
I'm coming back. I know
Good.
we have, for those of you who didn't see me at the beginning, I'm Laura Kosolopoff, right, from the Wiregrass Museum of Art, joining again, and I will field any questions. And I know we have several here. The first one, what does it mean to live and work in the South? And does that impact your work in any way? I'll let you guys kick it off.
Which, Bob, do you want to, or you want me to?
I think you should start. I've got something I can say to that.
Okay.
But you should
You know, growing up in the South to me has a huge stamp that it put on me. I know that my work is not going to be blatantly in your face. It's going to have layers, a little Gothic sometime, because I think that's, you know, I noticed that I'm not quite as polite as I used to be. But, you know, I'm sorry, you know, but that's living away. We're very polite down here. Sometimes I don't think we need to be quite as polite when we want to have a good conversation. The question is, how is it affected? And it is a gorgeous place to live. It's a tremendously supportive place to live. But and it's like any place, New York is provincial. You know, there's a big picture of how, you know, you're only on a little island, you don't, you know, the rest of the world is out there. Every place is provincial in itself. And something that we all have to do is to be sure to try to not reach out again and have the world that we sort of compare ourselves to. We think about ourselves in relation to this. We live in a world that's not quite as limited as it used to be. I think that the advantages of, you know, of space and conversation and artists and support from other artists is, you know, it's all very much of a gift to get to enjoy. And I feel very fortunate to be living in Alabama again.
I would say, no, I haven't lived here. I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere. And I've lived in a lot of places because my dad was in the military. But, you know, I learned this working at the university, but it applies to everything. So this is what I've always said. Rather than wanting to leave, make the place you are the place where everyone else wants to come. Also, I've said to students, you know, a lot of times students will say, oh, I grew up in a rural area. I want to leave. I got to get out of here. And what I tell them is that what I find are those students are the bravest. And I use brave and courageous a lot when I'm talking about art, but they'll go off to Atlanta, you know, to do graduate school. They are fearless. Or they'll go to New York. They'll just drop everything and go to New York. But that's because of that strong foundation of their growing up in a place like the South. So it really deepens roots. It fortifies your confidence. And I mean, and it's affordable, right? It's a way to commute very little, right? You're not wasting your time driving. So it's a wonderful place to make.
And you have space, and you don't have to spend all of your time, you know, commuting or trying to earn a living to be able to pay for where you live and work.
That's right.
So,
Still
mhm,
competition,
mhm.
which is
And you also, people are really nice.
Yeah.
They want to be supported. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
I think there's some tourism departments from around the state and the Southeast who could use your kind words. You'll could recruit a lot of people to move down here.
True.
Okay, we have another question. Then this is for Barb. How does working as a bricoleur inform your choice of materials to work with?
So that's creating from a diverse range of available things. So what I would say is I still go searching until I can put my finger on it, what it is that's going to do what I need it to do to get the idea across. So what I would say is working as a bricoleur would mean being informed about the materials that are out there and how to work with them. So for example, I know that there is light emitting concrete. Now, I don't know that I will ever use it, but at least I know it exists. So to me, it's like be aware, and everything is up for game, whether it's lint at the laundromat, which I have boxes full of, and or anything like any other material that's new and coming into the product, or type of adhesives or glues that couldn't do this before, but now they can put two things together. So that's my answer, is like the idea, it is to be informed of a diverse range of materials and have all these things in your head to choose from.
Wonderful. Okay, we have one for Sara. Question for Sara. Your body of work and projects you've worked on are so diverse, including your studio spaces. When you have an idea for something you want to make, but don't know how to build it or fund it, what has been your process to move forward through those obstacles?
Well, I'll take the process first, not the funding, but I've done that too. Is I, just keep searching, and a lot of times I'm having other people that are in the studio doing something, and we're searching together. Because I've got to find something that's going to work with that. What surprises me sometimes, like I'll just say the example of how to translate a glue gun into something that's going to be physical and that could, be a couple of inches, wide and do. And that ended up being a material that I had used, the gel medium. I had used it as coating a lot, but somehow or another, I started putting it on glass so I could pull it up. So it's experimenting a lot too. And the funding, I like to do what I want to do. And I think that coming up with a plan to be able to, if you have a big project and you really want to do it, then you just come and figure it out, and you can be a little bit creative with how you approach it, and somehow I've survived.
That's where those creative thinking skills as an artist come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And friends, and courage, exactly. And friends, just having the courage to ask someone to fund your project. The worst they can say is no, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a question for both of you now. If you had unlimited time and resources, what would you create? And what are your dream projects?
The next project.
Yeah. Oh yeah, go ahead, Sara.
Yeah, you go, Barb, and then I'll go. You go.
Well, I've always wanted to do this. Okay, so this is based on the idea of doing an art project that sort of strips you bare to the point where it's as real as it gets. The art becomes the most important thing. You disappear because it's so challenging that I disappear into the work, into the process, and the work is what only matters. So for me, it's always been to get to that point, because it doesn't always happen, where I feel like I know the art is far more significant than me. this person. So I would love to have time, that's really hard to get, and a room that has no windows, all walls, and I would paper the wall with drawing paper, and I'd bring my materials inside. I'm not going to discuss the details because I wouldn't figure that out until later. I'd have the door locked, and I'd like to stay in there and see what happens. So I'd like to sort of unpack my head for what I can imagine, what I know, and what I think, because I think those are all three different things. It's kind of scary. No source, no source materials. A pencil,
Yeah.
just a couple of pencils and the paper and an eraser or two.
And the
How about you, Sara?
you know, that is really, time is the critical, and so, and enough money. It's not, you know, I never really think about wanting unlimited as much as time and just to continue to keep going. So, and I don't know what that project would be, because I hadn't gotten there. And I just, you know, I said I had tunnel vision. And so I mean, the tunnel really does keep me in where I am, but I always get out of it, go to the next thing. So I'm just not sure.
Artist residencies, I haven't done many because of time. But when I did my first one, which was again later in life, late bloomer, I was like beside myself. It was so important and so vital to just have not even internet connection. And all you had to do was just work and think and make.
And maybe that's part of, to isolate yourself from having all these other things that you also have to do.
Yeah.
So that you, and I think, Barb, what you're talking about, that space to be, but I think the interruptions that you every day, that, you know, all the tons of interruptions, and it would be great to just disappear into it.
Imagine what, yeah, can't even imagine.
That's making me think of Harper Lee from Alabama, who lived in New York also for a very long time, as we all know. And I think this is a true story, that her friends pooled their money together and gave it to her so that she didn't have to work while she was writing To Kill a Mockingbird. And I just have always thought that was such an amazing gift that her friends gave her. And so I think you could think of an artist residency like that, someone just giving you the money to sit and think and create and do what you like. If anybody else has a question, please put it in the chat now. I have a quick question. I've always, if you don't mind, I've always been fascinated at just the intersection of art and science, and how many art and science couples there are out there, you know, just like romantic partners who are attracted to each other, who are scientists and artists, or just friends who are scientists and artists, just because I feel like scientists and artists have to tap into that creative and expansive thinking parts of their brain. So I was just wondering, what is on the horizon for either one of you all as far as projects relating to art and science again? And how can, you know, I think that still, unfortunately, you know, when people are talking about going into areas of study, you know, how can we elevate the study of art, its importance, to the level, you know, that people, you know, give to the study of science or engineering or something like that. I was thinking that Auburn just built this fabulous new structural engineering building that is going to allow people to run all these amazing tests, and it's going to, you know, encourage all these people to come to Auburn and study. And I thought, you know, it's kind of like having just a creative room to do whatever you want with all the materials you want. And so that gets so much press, and I'm always frustrated when the arts don't get as much wonderful press. That was a kind of a long question, but anyway, art and science, anything you have to say about that?
Sara,
Well, Barb, you're going on with the art. You're continuing with
So-
your science in the research there.
Mhm. And so what I would say, okay, so first of all, having done a lot of reading about the argument for arts in education, the argument isn't look what the arts do for other areas of study. No, look what the arts do in and of themselves. And that's what this research project has shown, that we are developing and using these executive skills like cerebral cortex skills, like cognitive skills are having an impact on the brain because we are using those kind of skills, not just sensation, sensual, perception. So I think we just have to have another understanding, and our study is going to show some of that. There is now scientific evidence that these cognitive skills come out of learning to draw. But I will just say real quickly, working with scientists and people in other disciplines, it's really hard at first because you have to learn each other's language. And there are different parameters for someone in science than there are for people in art. What we do with our art, how we show our art, versus how a study is publicized or shared with the world. And what I noticed is, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, is that, but I like it. What I discovered is I use studio thinking. So I admire scientists. I love the way they think. But I realized later again in life, I didn't need to be one. What I do is I bring studio thinking to the sciences. So I make a great big mess, and then it all comes together at the end. That's how I think. That's a studio mind at work. And I think these different types of thinking, like divergent and convergent thinking, should come together and learn from each other, but in a way that the artist is as important as the scientist. And that's how it was in my project. We both respected each other's field. And what happened is we came out from this collaboration with new questions, new to both of our fields. And so that was because that's like transdisciplinary. We went beyond just interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. Yeah, I think it's really important.
And I think that we have to be willing to connect and do that. And maybe if it's not as a huge project and all of this, but being able to connect with people in other disciplines, because we all gain from it. And just that sort of exchange of approaches to thinking.
Yeah, I agree. Something new comes of it.
I love those answers. And I think unless anyone else has a question, I think we'll wrap up for the evening and just thank everyone for joining us. And Barb and Sara, I know you both have websites for anyone who might not know them. Could you say your websites, your addresses really quickly, just so people can follow along with you after this talk?
Okay. So Bob, you go first.
Okay, well, first, can I say thank you for this great opportunity. Thank you to the Wiregrass Museum and Laura, and of course Sara, and go see her show. It's fantastic work, and think about it in the scope of how much work is there and fun. My website is Barb Bondy, BARBBONDY, barbbondy.com. It's my name. I kept both B's in the middle. BB.
And I actually have two, because the one with the book and sort of news and all is saragardnerarmstrong.net. And the older website, which I couldn't update and needs to be, and so it has sculpture and drawings and everything, and that's saragardnerarmstrong.com. So.
And that's excellent to itself, is keeping the website up to date.
That is a whole, that is a whole job unto itself. It is.
Right.
Living in this digital world is great, but it requires a lot of work. So thank you all again so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to have you both here. I'm so glad you all had this idea to have this conversation. I'm so glad that Ground Floor Contemporary in Birmingham brought you together. So follow them as well. And I have a copy of Sara's book right here. So it's really beautiful. It's so wonderful. She was down in Dothan 2 weeks ago now, I think, maybe, Sara,
Yeah.
signing her book. So, and that's available at Sara's website and also at the Wiregrass Museum of Art's website, wiregrassmuseum.org. Just look for the shop tab and it's there. And this talk, in case you missed it, or in case the beginning of it, or any part of it, or in case you'd like to share it with someone, I'll have it up on Wiregrass Museum of Art's Facebook page and also our YouTube channel sometime tomorrow. So check back then, and please join us again and follow along and follow Sara and Barb's work. And I hope everyone has a great evening.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you.
Everybody do the work.
Yeah, stay safe and have a great one.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.